Good evening. Today I'm going to talk about a very important topic that is actually a little bit different from the other sutras. The sutra that we're going to talk about is Alagaddūpama Sutra. That's the 22nd sutra of Majjhima Nikaya. But when we take a look at the core of the sutra, what we understand is that the sutra provides us some insights in unlearning the learned Dharma. Now, what we know in most of the other sutras is that we want to learn Dharma, right? But in this sutra, for some reasons, there is a historical reason that is going with a monk. But overall in the sutra, what Buddha says is that we need to unlearn the learned Dharma, because Dharma is just for the understanding. In the spiritual terms, in the Buddhist terminology, to cross over the samsara. So that's the gist of this sutra. So let's take a look at this sutra. So there's a monk called Aritta in this sutra at the beginning. So this monk comes to an understanding about the main general spiritual path in a different way. So it goes like this: as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Buddha, those things called obstructions for the spiritual path, as a monk, by the Blessed One, are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. So that's what he came up with. So he was discussing with this understanding with some other monks, and they were telling him that it's not good to misinterpret the Buddha. So they were actually highly on the understanding that this understanding of monk called Aritta misinterprets the Buddha's original, authentic, real Dharma. So they were actually reminding him, the Buddha has stated, actually what was the obstructive understanding that he came up with was the sensual pleasures, kind of like excessive sensual pleasures, do not harm anybody who is on the spiritual path. But that's not the truth. So these monks were telling him, the Buddha has stated that sensual pleasures provide little gratification. There is a gratification, but little gratification. Appasada in Pali. Bahudukkha, much suffering. I mean, this is for a very disciplined monk who is on the path. Despair, bahupayasa, and then there are some dangers associated with that. And these monks were telling monk Aritta, the harmful outcome of this understanding in other ways. They were saying that misguided man, to that monk Aritta, that there are 10 similes or parables about thinking about these excessive sensual pleasures to be good. So these 10 parables are, probably might have heard. So when somebody is overindulging in the sensual pleasures, the state that person may come could be something like a skeleton, like let's say skeleton in terms of, let's say, a fleshless bone for a dog. Dog tries to eat it, but there is no any taste, but it's something like that. It's like a gross torch carried against the wind severely, burns the carrier. So something like this. So there are 10 parables about the indulgence of 10 sensual pleasures. Sorry, the sensual pleasures excessively. So these monks were telling him this understanding is not good, because by understanding Dharma in this way will actually harm your practice. That's what they were telling in all these ways. And anyway, these monks then approached the Buddha and then told this to the Buddha. And then Buddha asked monk Aritta to come and then to know what went really wrong at this point. And then he was telling the same thing. He was telling that excessive sensual pleasures or those things are not really harmful for his practice. Or probably he's suggesting that it's not harming to any monastic or any person, regardless of monastics or lay people. And then Buddha was giving him a talk. So this is how he talks. Here, monks, some misguided men learn the Dhamma discourses. Actually, probably you might have heard the classification of the Buddha's teachings from the Tripitaka bracket. Tripitaka is one of the ways of classifying his teachings, but that was pretty late actually, because at the Buddha's time, Buddha uses this in a different way. He uses something called Navanga Satru Shastra. So there are 9 components of his teachings. So the first one is called Sutta, Dhamma discourses, and Geya, stanza. There are some teachings he gave in stanzas, in a kind of not in a poetic way, but just they were stanzas. Sometimes they were expositions. They were kind of like, explanations to some extent. Sometimes they were verses to and exclamations that he or other monks made. And sometimes they were sayings, itibuttaka. Sometimes they were birth stories like Jataka. Sometimes they were marvels, like things that a normal being cannot believe in the first place. Sometimes teachings were in the form of answers to some questions called Vedala. And now Buddha says to that monk and the rest of the monks, so having learned the Dhamma, most of the people, including this monk, do not examine the meaning of those teachings, those 9 types of teachings with wisdom. So when we learn Dharma, we don't usually examine the meaning with wisdom. So what is the wisdom in Buddhism? That's a good question, right? Now we have to use wisdom to examine the Dharma that we are learning from any source, probably from a monk, probably from a scripture, from another source. So Buddha says, in the first place, a lot of people who learn Dharma, they do not examine the meaning of that Dharma with wisdom. Actually, what is wisdom in Buddhism, in normal terms? Buddha says, we should have an understanding of everything based on 3 principles. The first one is, sabbe sankhara anicchati. So, all the conditioned things, people, whatever the things, they are subject to change. Now I'm a conditioned thing because I was made from kind of entity, and these immaterial things, except the nirvana, rest of the all things are conditioned. So all those conditioned things are subject to change. So our perspective in looking at anything, any phenomenon, any situation, any outcome, result, should have this component in our perspective. The second one in the wisdom, sabbe sankhara anicchati, sabbe sankhara dukkhati. So when we know that all the these things or these people are subject to changes, and then what happens immediately is that we are not happy about those changes, right? We are not in a position to accept those changes at most of the times, right? So then what happens is the dissatisfaction, unsatisfactoriness is always associated with that. And the third component with wisdom is to say sabbe dhamma anattati. All the dhamma in this context means the mental states actually. So mind and its objects, mind objects, as we discuss in the Satipatthana Sutta. So all these dharmas or mind states, or not even the mind states, mind objects, but also Dhamma has a polysemic understanding. It has a variety of meaning, not even the state of mind, nature, reality, it has many things actually, that Dhamma word. So all those states, mind objects, realities of life, they are actually anatta. Anatta is that you can own those stuff because they are not you, right? Anatta. So it's not atta, it's anatta. So now what Buddha asks at this point is, every time, every moment when we recollect, when we contemplate on the Dharma that we learn from somebody, from a book, from whatever the source, probably from our own life situation, life experiences, need to be examined with wisdom. So wisdom was that? To see the changes of the conditioned things, people, to see the suffering, not the suffering, probably unsatisfactory and dissatisfaction of those changes, and then to see the nature of anatta of all the conditioned things and states of mind, nature, reality. So Buddha says we need to examine the Dharma, whatever those 9 types of Dharma, with wisdom. Not even that. And then we need to gain a reflective acceptance of that. It's kind of reflective acceptance. Now what happens to us is that we, most of the time, trying to get the literal meaning of the words of the Buddha's teachings, Pali words. But I wonder, sometimes we ended up with some scholastic literalism, because we don't know what was the intention behind of those teachings at some point. So I think while we trying to see the Pali words, because language might sometimes be not good, not pretty accurate, precise about what Buddha said, but sometimes we need to see what was the context, what was the situational point of view in those teachings. So we need to go hand in hand with the language and the intentions of the Buddha and the other teachings. So then we can come up to a point called reflective acceptance. And Buddha also says, now he was actually pointing out this monk, and then he was talking based on what happened with this monk, and actually based on a wider audience at that point, not even for that monk. Sometimes what many people do after learning Dharma, instead they learn the Dharma only for the sake of criticizing others. This is a big problem in modern times. We get to learn Dharma from different sources. Sometimes some people, because they know a lot of things, they might feel like, okay, I can test your knowledge or somebody else's knowledge. But that's not what Buddha expects us to do with the learned Dharma. So for the sake of criticizing others is not a good thing. And also for winning in debates, right? Probably, I don't know, there are some Buddhist scholastic debates, but the real Dharma is not for a debate, not up for a debate. So when somebody is using the learned Dharma for the sake of criticizing others, or for something like debates, then they are losing the original purpose of Dharma. So then they are in trouble. Now Buddha uses a simile. Now this simile is the meaning of the sutra's name. As you understand, Alagaddūpama is a snake, but some people translate this to be as a water snake. I don't know how that came into existence, but a snake. So how Buddha relates the snake, the simile of the snake to this understanding. We'll take a look. Now, people, when they use the learned Dharma for debates, for criticizing others, then what will happen to them? Those teachings are being wrongly grasped by them, those people, for a long time. Now, then I think the person who has not learned the Dharma is much better than this person, but these people having learned the Dharma, they are in a big trouble. Why is that? Because of the wrong grasp of those teachings. So Dharma has to be learned in a proper way. If you learn the Dharma in a wrong way, if you in a wrong way, then we are actually in trouble. Now he tells us this simile. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and grasp its coils or its tail, right? It would turn back on him and bite his hand or his arm or one of his limbs. And because of that, he would come to death or deadly suffering. Why is that? Because of his wrong grasp of the snake. He uses the parable of the snake, the way how the man catches the snake, holds the snake, because that thing will kill him. So he uses the same thing to the time. Now what does he say? Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Now there's a simple question coming up in our understanding. Now we try to collect Dharma from different sources, but the real purpose of Dharma, according to Buddha, is not to keep it like in a pile of places, but to understand it and then to unlearn that. Because if you carry something that is really not good for our understanding, it will not really help us to understand Dharma. So Dharma is just for understanding, not to keep it as a source of knowledge. Now let's take a look at this simile of raft and how he describes it. Suppose a man in the course of a journey saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous. So this man never expected this, probably a lake or something, or river, and be dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear, but there was no ferry or boat or bridge for going to the foreshore. There is no any mode of transportation to go to the other side. Now he thinks, suppose I collect grass, twigs, branches and leaves and bind them together into a raft, and supported by the raft and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely across to the far shore. Then when he had got across and had arrived at the foreshore, he might think thus. Now this is what we really want to pay attention to. This raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I want to hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulder and then go wherever I want. Now Buddha asks from the monks, what do you think, monks? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with the raft? Right? So it's a very simple question. Like, you don't need that anymore. You don't need that raft anymore because you just use it, and then you might not need it to carry. At that time, there were no vehicles and big stuff, so it's an external, burdens on his trip. And then bhikkhus, when you know the Dharma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even the teachings. How much more so things contrary to the teaching? So what about the adharma, that is not dharma? So Buddha asks us to unlearn dharma. Because you understood already, don't keep it anymore, because it's an extra burden to you. I would tell read the Pali, statement. Kullupamo maya dhammo desito nittaranattaya no gahanattaya. Kullupamango bhikkhave dhamma desitang ajanante dhamma pivo pahatabba pagevada. Now this is the main thing in this sutra. So Buddha asks us to unlearn the learned dharma. That doesn't mean that somebody who is still a beginner and then studying something and suddenly I don't want to actually learn anymore. That's not the thing. Now, when you understand the reality of the life with dharma, then you are at a certain point, then you get to know that now I already understand it. I don't want to actually keep it as a burden in my perspective. That's the point, right? So after telling this thing, and then Buddha talks about number of things about impermanence and not self. So I will talk a few things about it, and then we can go for the Q&A session. Now Buddha asks from the monks. Now actually this is totally related to the self view, right? So what we call to be ego. So personal identity thing, atta concept. Any position that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. So monks say no. Any doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. The Buddha asks, is there any doctrine that might not cause you lamentation, sorrow, pain? Actually, this doctrine related to the self. Any position that we have would not create you any sorrow, lamentation, and etc., etc. So monks say, no, all are actually subject to those changes. Buddha also say, I too see that. So Buddha goes on saying all these, all these small points about atta and anatta, self and not self things. And one of the very important things that Buddha talks at the end of the sutra, we should talk about those few things. Now, Buddha, somewhere at the end of the sutra, asks from the monks, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? What is material form? Now Buddha talks about the 5 aggregates, right? Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So form, feelings, form, Rupa, Vedana, feelings, Sanya, perceptions, Sankhara, formations, and consciousness. Now Buddha picks one by one. So what do you think, monks? Is the material form permanent or impermanent? Now, we all like material forms, right? Actually, we are momentarily always changing, right? So it's impermanent. Venerable said, what is impermanence? Suffering or happiness? And monks say suffering. I don't know whether these translations might be really good. I would say kind of dissatisfaction because things are getting changed. Is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. So can we talk about our own form to be mine, this I am, this is myself? Not in the real sense, but in the conventional sense, yes. This is me, this is my stuff, and this I am. We could talk about such things in that way, in a kind of a conventional context, but not in the real sense with the reality. Now he goes on to say all the other rest of the aggregates, and then he talks about something that the other people were actually pointing to him at that time, because other actually recluses and other religious leaders were actually blaming him that he was actually entertaining teachings like there is an eternity, there is a non-eternity. So those things were actually were proposed by other people, other religious leaders at that time, and they were claiming that Buddha also does the same thing. And he says, no, monks, both formally and now, when the formal Buddhas and myself, we teach the dissatisfaction, dukkha, and how to end the dukkha. So nothing else. So that's what we actually talk about, and teach also. And Buddha asked the monks to understand dissatisfaction, dukkha, and how to end dissatisfaction. So dissatisfaction and how to end dissatisfaction, they were talking in different other sutras, not in here. So, and at the end of this sutra, he talks about the nature of a person who already attained nirvana. There's no patchwork to be done. He's already done. He has nothing to worry. So he's actually super good at that point. So anyway, so to recap the whole thing, I would like to say that this sutra was told by the Buddha because of the monk called Aritta, because he came up with a wrong understanding about the spiritual path, because he was thinking that the obstructive feelings about, especially the excessive sensual pleasures, were nothing for somebody who is on the path. But Buddha says no, they actually affect us, because we need to be very mindful about the excessive sensual desires. And when this was brought up, then Buddha says what is to be like when somebody is to grasp Dharma in the wrong place. It's something like you holding a snake on its wrong place, and that same snake will bite you. At the same time, in the same way, the Dharma that you touch, you grasp on the wrong side, will actually make you in trouble. So treat the Dharma as a raft. When you take a look at the simile of the raft, you could see that how the man made those things, twigs and branches and grass, and then made that raft, and then how he thought after he crossing over with the raft. So treat the Dharma as a raft, so you don't need anymore to keep it with you, to bring it with you. So that doesn't mean that we disrespect the Dharma. We learn the Dharma with respect, but when we understand it, we don't think that we need to carry Dharma as a knowledge, as a normal knowledge. It's an understanding. So that's what Buddha asks us to practice. So overall, I would say this sutra gives us an understanding about learning Dharma. At the same time, the need of unlearning the Dharma whenever you feel that you are on the right path, you're on the harmonious path to continue. So that's what this sutra is all about. Any questions?
I think I understand what you're saying. So is it kind of like once you fully understand or have the wisdom, there's no need to know. I guess my question is, what would be the harm? You know how you said if you hold the snake from the wrong, if you know the Dhamma in the incorrect way, then it can bite you or it will be harmful. If you understand it in the correct way, and then you use it like a raft, so you use it, you don't need to hold on to it, you use it when you need it, what would be the harm in still keeping the knowledge for when you need to use the raft again?
That's a really good question. Actually, now what it says is not to blame for the knowledge that somebody can carry, but don't treat the Dharma that you learn as a mere knowledge.
Okay, I see.
That's the point.
Okay.
That doesn't actually blame the knowledge. that you earn from different channels. So yeah, we don't know. Probably we might need to cross another river. Don't know, right? But the thing is that we should not actually disregard Dharma to be a simple knowledge, and then just to pile up that knowledge, and without taking the real essence of that Dharma in our spiritual path. And also, I think unlearning is a very good concept in this sutra. Sometimes, now what happens to a computer when you don't clear the internet history? The computer is getting slow, right? Yeah. But maybe those things that in the history might be important for you in the future, right? But sometimes we need to delete the history, clear the history. I think while we won't, I don't think that we can unlearn everything. That's not possible. But unlearn the unnecessary stuff, right? While we're thinking about, because there is a widespread understanding that we need to learn Dharma as much as we can. But there is no similar perspective to say that at some point we need to unlearn. Unlearn doesn't mean that we're gonna forget about the knowledge that we had, because we have shaped our mind with the knowledge, right? Yeah. But we don't just keep it as a mere knowledge, and then because Buddha was talking about, don't use Dharma for criticizing others, the Dharma that and don't use the Dharma for the debates, to win in debates for those secular purposes, especially when it comes to that level. So there's no problem in using that whenever you want it, but don't keep it just as a knowledge, as what we learn from universities and other places, right? We have learned a lot, right? Sometimes those things might not even need at some point. So this is something for real understanding in our life, and then to bring us into the next level of our spiritual path. Okay. Yeah.
I understand.
Good. Good.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions.
Any more questions? Okay. So let's wrap this up. Let's share all the good karmas with the departed relatives and the deities. Idang me ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Idang me ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Idam me ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang. Sabbe deva anumodantu, sabbe bhuta anumodantu, sabbe satta anumodantu, sabba sampatti sindhya. Akasattha ca bummatta deva naga mahiddhika, punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu loka sasanang. Akasattha ca bummatta deva naga mahiddhika, punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu desanang. Akasattha ca bummatta deva naga mahiddhika, punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu mang paranti. So finally, let's make a great wish. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating so far help all of us to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana as well. Give a sadhu, and I'm going to bless you with a couple stanzas. Abhivadana silis nichang vaddha pachaino, chattaro dhamma vaddhanti ayuvanno sukhang balang, ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevache, ato nibbana sampatti iminate samichatu.